for us. Okay, looks like we're live streaming. Anything else anyone wants to bring to my attention? Okay, let's go ahead with prosecution's opening statement.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Right place, right time, right defendant. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, my name is Ainsley Bidgood, and we are here today because Mackenzie Brackman was killed in his home the afternoon of March 6th. The evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker committed murder in the first degree and burglary in the second. Avery Becker was a senior at Colorado High School, where Mackenzie Brackman was the head coach for mock trial. The evidence will show that Avery has a history of rash decision-making and letting her emotions control her actions. Avery was not at school the day of the murder. Avery claims that Avery and Taylor were skipping school to look for Avery's phone Avery had lost at Fry Shack the day before, making Avery's best friend, one who would do anything for her, her only alibi. Expert witness Kyle Cusack will testify that the perpetrator caught in the Ring doorbell was the same build and height as Avery. Right place. You will hear from expert witness Detective Jordan Markowitz that Avery was at Brackman's house the day of the murder. Right time. The Ring doorbell footage will show a person the same build and height as Avery at the time of the murder. Right defendant. Avery has a history of criminal mischief against Brackman. Avery even told her mom she would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing she did. Alex Fuentes will testify to Avery's character and history of rash decision-making. Right place, right time, right defendant. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, this cannot be a coincidence. Avery made a rash decision to burglarize Brackman's house. She let her emotions take over and she killed him. Now she has to pay. Remember that Avery told her mom Avery would do anything if it was the last thing she did to get back at Brackman. So members of the jury, we ask for a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree and burglary in the second. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense opening?
Yes, Your Honor. You just heard a theory without evidence. The defense will show you a different picture today, that this case is anything but open and shut, that the police and prosecution failed to consider all leads, collect evidence, interview witnesses, and in fact, incorrectly interpreted evidence. It is your job to decide whether or not the prosecution has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt, a very high standard. If you have even the slightest doubt as to whether Avery Becker could have killed Mackenzie Brackman, then you must acquit. The truth is that Avery did not kill Mackenzie Brackman. She was out all day with her best friend looking for her lost phone, as any teenager would do. Avery is just a girl, a former student at Colorado High School. She is a friend, a daughter, a classmate. She is not a murderer. Why then is Avery sitting in front of you today? Because she was framed. How? The police failed to properly investigate this crime. Had they done their job, Avery would not be sitting here today. My client will admit that she foolishly wrote on her coach's car, a terrible lapse in judgment. But did she know she had grabbed a permanent marker? Absolutely not. The prosecution built their entire case on a childish transgression. They will have you believe that after vandalizing Mackenzie Brackman's car, Avery then planned on vandalizing his house. Why does the prosecution think this? Hard copy printouts of text messages allegedly exchanged between Alex Fuentes and Avery. However, consider this. The police have never examined, much less laid eyes on Avery or Alex's phone. They have no reliable evidence that this text exchange ever even occurred, just a cooked up printout of a fictional conversation. The defense's expert, Professor Van Owen, will testify that text messages could have easily been doctored by Alex. She will also establish that the call detail records are inherently unreliable. CDRs cannot determine the actual location of a phone since calls don't necessarily connect to the closest cell tower. And of course, CDRs can't tell us the location of a phone's owner, who could be somewhere else entirely. The police also failed to gather CDR evidence from the day before the crime for other people connected to this case, or interview other people identified by the police as plausible suspects. For example, Blair Rollins' father went to prison after Mackenzie Brackman lost his court case. Surely, watching your father go to prison is more of a motive to kill than being cut from the mock trial team. Moreover, Blair was absent from school the day Mackenzie Brackman was killed, has left Colorado, and he's the same height and build as Avery. You will also hear from the defendant, Avery and Taylor Perkins. They will both testify that Avery lost her phone the day before the crime and were frantically searching for it on the day Mackenzie Brackman was murdered. This is wholly confirmed by Taylor's constant texts and calls to Avery's phone as they searched. The police came to the easiest conclusion possible based upon one seriously flawed lead by another suspect and unreliable call records. An open and shut case. However, a teenage girl's life and liberty are on the line. Don't let sloppy police work and a patently superficial investigation ruin this innocent girl's life. Members of the jury, it is your job to listen to all the evidence, especially the lack of evidence. Once you do, you will find that the prosecution absolutely did not meet their burden of proof. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's start with the prosecution's first witness. Call your witness.
We would like to call Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
All right.
May we proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Markowitz, Markowitz.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been a homicide detective?
Well, I started my career with DPD roughly 13 years ago, and I have been a detective for 7 years.
Do you have any specialized training?
I do.
What is your training in?
My training is in cell phone technology and forensic data recovery.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how you received your certification?
I got my certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement. I took a training course and passed an exam to receive it.
Your Honor, we move to enter witness as an expert in phone technology, forensic data recovery, and homicide investigation, pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
The witness is so qualified. You may continue.
Can you describe a little bit about how you use your training with cell phone data during an investigation?
Sure. During my training, I learned about forensic software and how it can be used to download information off of the phone. I also learned how to obtain and interpret cell tower data.
Can you tell me a little bit about how cell towers can track a location?
Forensic software such as the Celebrate system can download information off of the phone. We can then go through that data and find the location of the cell phone.
Can you tell me about how this information relates to Avery's case?
Data was able to show that Avery Becker's cell phone was found in the area of Brackman's house.
Detective Markowitz, do you have a copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 16?
Yes.
I direct your attention to that exhibit. Would you identify it, please?
These are the cell tower records for Avery Becker's phone.
How do you know this?
I put this diagram together myself.
Is it a fair and accurate representation?
It is.
Your Honor, we move to enter Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 is admitted.
Your Honor, may I have permission to publish this exhibit to the jury?
Yes, you may.
All right. Detective Markowitz, could you explain what this exhibit shows us about Avery's cell phone?
It tells us that Avery's cell phone was found in the area of Brackman's house. Additionally, the blue dotted line shows the suspected route that Avery's cell phone traveled.
Can you describe what you saw at the crime scene when you arrived?
When I arrived, I saw the victim face down on the floor just inside the residence, and the victim was in a pool of blood. A large knife was visible on the floor just by his body, and from the angle of the body, it appeared that the victim had most likely fallen to the ground while trying to leave the residence.
What conclusions can you tell about Avery's case?
We can draw to the conclusion that Avery was in the area of Brackman's house at the time of the murder, which can give evidence of Avery intending to break in.
Did you notice anything unusual about Brackman's house when you investigated?
Well, I did notice a broken plate on the ground along with a knocked over chair, but relative to the stabbing, I noticed blood splatter. This indicated to me that there must have been some sort of struggle. What I thought was most unusual is that the expensive items such as the flat screen TV and a computer had gone untouched.
Why do you think that expensive items went untouched if you believe this was intended to be a burglary?
I believe that Becker intended to break in and burglarize the house, so she would have stolen the expensive items, but when she saw Brackman, she was startled and murdered him.
Is there anything else that you noticed at the crime scene?
Yes, I located Ring doorbells.
Can you describe what a Ring doorbell is and how it relates to this case?
The Ring doorbell is a recording doorbell that can detect motion and begin a video recording of its surroundings. It relates to this case because Brackman had 3.
Were you able to access what those cameras captured?
Yes, we found on them the burglar attempting to enter Brackman's front door.
What are your final conclusions about this case?
I believe that what happened was that Becker had intended to break into Brackman's house. She was then startled to see him home during a workday, and Brackman used the kitchen knife as a weapon to the unknown intruder. After that, Avery must have somehow gotten a hold of the knife and stabbed Brackman.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. You knew the victim, Mackenzie Brackman, before he was killed.
That is true.
You knew him because you had investigated crimes that Brackman later defended in court.
Yes.
You had the displeasure of being crossed by him.
Yes.
Brackman would take a lot of cheap shots attacking police work.
Yes.
So you did not think highly of Mackenzie Brackman.
I did not.
And this bias led you to cut corners and jump to conclusions in this case.
That is not true.
Well, Alex was the first mock trial student you called.
Yes.
And Alex provided the biggest break in the case for you.
Yes.
And this was due in part to the screenshots of messages that they sent you.
Yes.
Screenshots of messages that could have easily been altered.
That is true, but we have no evidence of that.
However, you did not collect Alex's phone to simply verify these screenshots.
No, Alex had forgotten their phone at home, and I understand that talking to the police can be a stressful thing and make people act normally or differently than they normally
So that's
would.
a no.
That is a no.
Even though Alex was the first teenager you had ever met that did not have their cell phone with them.
Again, it can make people act differently than they normally would.
You did not have them simply bring back the phone to you later?
I didn't want to cause them more stress. I had enough evidence.
So that's a no.
That's a no.
Additionally, you obtained CDRs from Avery's cell phone.
Yes.
And through these CDRs, you discovered that Perkins was calling Avery, but Avery was not picking up.
Yes.
And you believe that Avery never responded to any of these calls or texts because she was in the middle of committing a crime.
Yes.
You never considered any other theories as to why Becker would not be answering her phone?
Nope.
Not even after you had been informed that Avery had lost her phone on March 5th, a full day before Mackenzie Brackman was murdered?
I can't take that as the truth.
These CDRs you testified to earlier are all from March 6th, the day after Avery had lost her phone.
Yes.
So these CDRs cannot account for Avery's actions.
That is true.
Your original thought was that Brackman had interrupted a burglary.
Yes.
Since Brackman did criminal defense work, you also questioned if this could be the work of a disgruntled ex-client.
Yes.
However, you never followed either of these leads up.
I didn't. I had the evidence I needed.
So that's a no.
Nope.
You never contacted any of his former clients.
No.
You never contacted any of their family members either,
No.
nor anyone else for that matter.
I had the evidence I needed.
You only ever investigated one person, Avery Becker.
No. Or sorry, yes. Sorry.
Detective Markowitz, you failed to complete a thorough investigation into this crime.
That is not true.
You did not authenticate screenshots of text messages.
That's true.
You failed to collect CDRs from the day before the murder.
That's true.
You failed to investigate any other leads.
That's true.
You failed to interview any other possible suspects.
I had all the evidence I needed.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may go ahead.
You would never let experience with anyone affect your conclusion at all. Is that correct?
That is true.
Objection, leading question.
Response?
May I rephrase?
Yes, you may.
Would you ever let an experience with anyone affect your conclusion?
Never.
And Detective Markowitz, do you believe that you gathered enough evidence to come to a clear and correct conclusion?
I do. I gathered cell tower data from Avery Becker's cell phone. I received evidence of Alex and Avery's texts, and I downloaded the contents of Brackman's cell phone. I also gathered Ring doorbell recordings of someone attempting to enter Brackman's house. I gathered more than enough evidence to come to my final conclusion.
And would you ever let personal bias get in the way of your work?
Never. I take my job seriously, and I have for the past 7 years.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Prosecution's witness number 2.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Kyle Cusack to the stand.
All right. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Cusack. Could you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Cusack, K-U-Z-A-K.
And are you currently employed, Ms. Cusack?
Yes,
What is your profession?
I'm a Colorado Bureau of Investigation crime scene reconstruction investigator.
And are you certified in this occupation?
I am.
How many years of experience do you have?
I've had 19 years of experience.
And where did you spend your most recent 3 years?
I've spent the most recent 3 years of my tenure with the City of Denver as a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to enter Kyle Cusack as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to voir dire.
You may go ahead.
You are a crime scene reconstruction investigator.
Yes,
You are simply a civilian employee.
yes.
You are not a trained police officer.
No, I'm not a trained police officer.
You never investigated a case as a police officer.
No, I have not.
Yet you are testifying on what happened at a crime scene and have never investigated a case as a police officer.
As a police officer, no.
Your Honor, I object to this witness being admitted as an expert in this field due to a lack of experience and qualifications to draw an expert conclusion about the case.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Kyle Cusack is certified in crime scene reconstruction, which has nothing to do with police work and does not have to do anything with police work. They've had 19 years of experience in investigating complex crime scenes like home invasions, burglaries, and other property crimes, as well as homicides and armed robberies, making them more than qualified to be an expert in crime scene reconstruction in this case.
Based on the witness's requisite experience as well as years in the field, the court will still qualify the witness as an expert in crime scene reconstruction. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Cusack, how are you related to the homicide at 444 South Flower Street?
I visited the scene of the homicide at 444 South Flower Street to reconstruct the crime scene. I also reviewed all the police reports in this case, the 10 photographs from the scene, and 4 ring security camera videos.
And do you have any key principles that guided your work in this case?
Yes, first I assume every case is going to trial, so I conducted a thorough, comprehensive investigation accordingly. Second, starting from day one, I memorized, documented, and organized all evidence with a mindset of future reconstruction.
And can you tell me more about your process when working?
Well, I have 5 parts to ensure that I have an efficient and accurate flow when working. There are recognition and documentation, collection of evidence, evaluation of evidence, hypothesis and testing, and reconstruction.
So then what was your first official step in your investigation of this case?
I used a witness tracking spreadsheet to summarize key points of information from witnesses and suspects. I often find reconstruction of objective evidence useful to corroborate or refute statements.
And what other visuals did you use to help lay out this case?
I also used a physical evidence tracking sheet to identify, describe, and document observations about the evidence and my observations made at the scene.
I see. And did you do anything else?
Yes, additionally, I drew a rudimentary flowchart. These visual aids are helpful in explaining the case to others, including other experts, attorneys, and juries.
And what do you typically do after?
My second and third case management steps involve preparing materials for formal analysis. In these steps, I expand the existing organizational framework to document evidentiary relationships and analysis. When images are the focus of an in-depth analysis, like here, I find separate spreadsheets to be helpful.
So can you give us an example from this case of how organizing photos into a spreadsheet led to key information about the events?
Of course, I saw photographs in this case that showed small drops of blood between the kitchen and the front door, where a knife and larger pools of blood are located. They also show blood cast off on the wall and ceiling near the front door. Organizing all these photos revealed a clear chronology, indicating that the victim was stabbed near the kitchen, proceeded to the front door, pulled the knife out, and dropped it there.
And what was your next step in this case?
My fourth step is to formally conduct the analysis and develop a hypothesis.
And your last step?
My fifth and final step involves CSR initial report preparation, peer review, and a final reconstruction report.
So going through this process and laying out and analyzing all of this evidence, did you form an initial opinion about this case?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so then please tell us about the opinion you formed for what happened on the afternoon of March 6th.
The conclusions the evidence led me to were essentially that during the afternoon of March 6, 2020, a perpetrator matching the general height and build of the defendant approached the victim's residence, initially stepping on the front porch and checking the front door as captured by a Ring door camera, then proceeding to the south side of the residence and out of the camera's range.
Did you look through any other type of security footage?
Yes, I did, and I saw an additional security camera on that side of the house, which picked up the perpetrator opening a fence gate and proceeding into the backyard.
So if the perpetrator opened the fence gate, did you recover any DNA or fingerprints from it?
No, I did not, but contrary to popular belief, fingerprints and DNA aren't left on every surface. And more importantly, in this case, it's clear from the security videos that the perpetrator was wearing gloves.
What else did you see in the videos?
Well, the perpetrator left the range of the second camera, but was captured approximately 10 seconds later by another security camera at the rear door of the victim's residence. The video from that camera shows the perpetrator opening the sliding glass door and entering the residence.
And when you walked into the residence, did you notice anything odd?
Yes, I saw scuff marks.
And what do those typically indicate?
They indicate that at least 2 individuals, most likely the victim and the perpetrator, were engaged in close contact in the continued
speculation.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. As she has just been entered as an expert witness in this case, she's allowed to testify as to her opinions on what scuff marks typically indicate.
Court will allow the testimony based on the witness's expertise.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You may continue.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What do scuff marks typically indicate?
They indicate that at least 2 individuals, most likely the victim and the perpetrator, were engaged in close contact in the kitchen near the back door.
And did you see anything else unusual in the kitchen?
Yes, a drawer was open in which several small knives and some other kitchen utensils were found. More importantly, a knife block was on the counter a few feet from the knife drawer.
And what was so important about the knife block?
Well, one knife appeared to be missing from the knife block. The empty slot in the block was for a large chef's knife. The knife ultimately recovered from the body of the victim was just such a knife.
And did anything else stand out to you?
Yes, there was a broken plate on the floor 5 feet from the back door.
And what do you think caused this plate to break?
I think that the plate most likely would have been knocked to the ground as the two individuals struggled.
Speculation, Your Honor.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is again related to her expertise in crime scene reconstruction and her expert opinion on why she believes the plate is broken.
Ms. Henderson, any further argument?
Your Honor, she is simply making an assumption and she's not actually stating a fact about what happened at the crime scene, and her job is to help us understand what actually happened that afternoon, not just speculation.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
This is going to the events of what happened at that crime scene because it's talking about the chronology of what happened when the victim and the perpetrator, in her opinion, were in a struggle.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may, Ms. Henderson.
Ms. Cusack has no proof of when this plate was broken or what the cause of it was, or what the cause of it breaking was.
At this point in time, the court's going to find that I'm going to sustain the objection, that the testimony is beyond the scope of expertise and speculative in nature. You may continue.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Was that all you observed while visiting the scene of the homicide?
No, there was also a series of small droplets of blood that began near the kitchen table and led to the front door. There's also a large amount of blood near the front door where the knife was recovered as well.
And after looking at all of this evidence, what do you believe happened once the intruder entered the residence?
I believe that the victim likely looked for a defense weapon in the knife drawer, but then took one from the knife block.
Was there an objection? I'm sorry, it cut in a little bit.
Yes,
Henderson?
speculation. Ms. Cusack is saying it is likely that something happened, but she does not actually have any proof that that happened.
Response?
Yes, pursuant to Rule 703, I believe based on the expert's opinion, they may state information not in evidence if they believe it is accurate according to their background in crime scene reconstruction.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cusack is simply stating a hypothetical. She is not stating a fact.
I do believe that the expert can testify to what they believe is a reasonable explanation for what they saw at the crime scene. This testimony, as opposed to the previous, is less speculative and more based on the evidence. So the court will overrule the objection. And Ms. Bresky, if you want to ask that question again.
Yes, please. So after looking at all of this evidence, what do you believe happened once the intruder entered the residence?
I believe that the victim likely looked for a defense weapon in the knife drawer, but then took one from the knife block. The victim confronted the intruder and they struggled, knocking the plate to the ground. And at some point, the intruder disarmed the victim and obtained the knife.
And what do you believe the perpetrator ended up doing with that knife?
Well, the location and the position of the knife is consistent with the fact that the intruder was close to the victim, maybe in a bear hug, then reached over and stabbed them in the shoulder.
Moving on, let's talk about Blake Van Owen. Do you know them?
Yes, I know Van Owen from CSR conferences. Blake was a police officer for a short time, but he was never a CSR. They simply review the work of an actual CSRs, mostly by reading our reports and trying to find ways to reinterpret the evidence we discuss. This will never provide a person with the same degree of understanding as being on the scene or directly examining the evidence.
And do you know about Blake Van Owen's conclusion in this case?
Yes, I do.
And what is that conclusion?
Blake Van Owen thinks that the intruder snuck up behind the victim and stabbed him in the back.
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is just based on the my apologies. I can move on.
All right, so hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. The court will sustain the objection to hearsay. Next question.
Do you believe that the intruder could have possibly sneaked up behind the victim?
It's not likely that the intruder surprised the victim. First, because of the Ring doorbell notification, and the victim would have heard the glass door open even if he didn't see the Ring notification.
And so based on the sufficient facts and data available to you and the reliable principles and methods you applied to this case, what is your final conclusion?
That this was clearly a planned burglary gone bad. The intruder had knowledge of the victim's property and residence and likely chose a time of day when the victim's pattern would place him outside of the home. However, the victim was present and alerted to the intruder's presence at the back of the house before the intruder entered. Unfortunately, in the ensuing struggle, the victim was killed with the same knife he introduced into the encounter.
Thank you. No further questions.
Examination.
Yes, Your Honor. You have two key principles that you use to guide your work.
Yes.
And this method would require that you visited the scene of the crime.
Yes.
But you were there after the evidence was processed by the crime lab.
Yes, I was.
You take pride in conducting organized investigations.
Yes.
And you were extremely organized using rudimentary flowcharts and a timeline to conduct your work.
Yes.
You mentioned in your testimony the photographs of the blood droplets are missing.
Yes, I do.
Why are they missing from evidence today, Ms. Kuzak?
Well, after I was able to examine the photos, they became corrupt.
You use these pictures to help you put together the chronology of the crime?
Yes, I did, because I examined the photos before they became corrupt.
Would you consider these photographs important?
Yes.
But these important pieces of evidence are not here for the jury to see today.
That's true.
The scuff marks in Brackman's house indicate a struggle.
Yes, I do.
Do you know when these scuff marks were made?
Well, I believe that they were made during the struggle while the intruder was breaking into the house.
Ms. Kuzak, do you know the exact date of when these scuff marks were made?
I cannot be sure.
If you do not know the date of when the scuff marks were made, can you be clear as if the scuff marks were made by the intruder or the victim?
I cannot.
Looking at the other evidence you found in the kitchen, you believe the murder weapon was the knife you found at the scene?
Yes, I do.
You found that the supposed murder weapon was a different brand from all of the other knives that were in the knife block in Brackman's kitchen.
Yes, I did.
And all of the other knives were the same brand.
Yes, they were.
You claim that it is likely that Brackman rushed to pull the knife out of an otherwise matching set of knives?
Yes, I do.
You theorize that Brackman pulled out the knife himself.
Yes.
If your theory is true, he would have to reach across his back with his left hand to pull out the knife.
Yes.
Did you notice any blood on his left hand when you visited the scene?
I did not.
Did you notice any blood on his right hand?
I did not.
With no blood on either of Brackman's hands, the evidence we have available is not consistent with your theory that he removes the murder weapon on his own.
Yes, that's true.
You insist your conclusion is the only possible scenario.
I do not think it's the only possible scenario, or yes, I do.
And to be clear, you came to your expert conclusion about this case without any biological evidence that Avery Becker was connected to the scene.
Well, I did think that Avery Becker was connected because her build is very similar to the.
Ms. Cusack, do you have any biological evidence that Avery Becker is connected to this scene?
No biological evidence.
You include individuals in your exhibit list, including Brandon Digby and Josiah Mitchell, yet you do not know what they said in these interviews?
Yes, that's true.
So we have no proof that you know what these witnesses said, but you use the fact that they were interviewed as pieces of evidence to create a chronology of the case?
Yes, I did.
You can't come to a conclusion about the case if you do not know the substance of every piece of evidence you mentioned in your spreadsheet.
I suppose.
With so much missing evidence, we cannot truly test if anything you have said today makes any sense.
Objection, argumentative.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm simply bringing to light that there is a lot of missing evidence from Ms. Kuzak's testimony today, and that evidence would be necessary for us to come to a conclusion about the case and what she perceived to have happened.
I'll allow the question. It's overruled. Can you ask the question again?
With so much missing evidence, we cannot truly test if your conclusion about this case makes any sense.
Yes, I suppose.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you, Ms. Kuzak.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. The blood splatter pictured in the now corrupted photos is also something that you saw at the crime scene.
Yes.
And is there a reason that there was no biological evidence found at the crime scene?
Yes, I believe that to be true because the perpetrator was wearing gloves.
And do you believe you had sufficient evidence and data in order to draw your conclusion?
Yes, I do.
And what is that final conclusion?
My final conclusion is that it was Avery Becker who broke into the house and murdered Mr. Brackman.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Witness is excused. All right. Prosecution's next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Alex Cifuentes to the stand.
All right. Mr. Cifuentes, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Ms. Cifuentes. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Cifuentes, Sifuentes.
What school are you currently enrolled in?
Colorado High School.
And what grade are you in?
I'm a senior.
Do you know Avery Becker?
Yes.
What is your relationship with her?
Avery Becker and I have always been really good friends. We went to the same high school, and I had been doing mock trial with her since I was a freshman.
Are you aware of the accusations of you and Avery not being friends and more being enemies?
Yes.
What do you think about these accusations?
I mean, honestly, I think it's really sad and totally ridiculous. Avery and I were basically best friends.
Can you tell us a little bit about Avery and your interactions on the mock trial team?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Avery and I were pretty equally skilled team members. We had a little bit of different approaches to mock trial. I put a lot of preparation into my work, while Avery tended to just do things on the fly.
Can you tell me a little more about her participation on the team?
Yeah, well, like I said, she was a really skilled team member. She was not only a great lawyer, but she was great at making things up on the witness stand too. And the only big problem was she was rarely ever prepared and almost always late for practice, which left everyone really frustrated.
Was she ever approached about these frustrations?
Yes, Mr. Brackman was always talking to Avery just about how she needed to be more prepared.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response?
I can just skip the question.
All right. So are you withdrawing the question?
Yeah.
Question is withdrawn. Next question.
Was there anything else that you saw Avery do that made Mr. Brackman mad?
Yes, one day Avery got really angry and wrote the worst attorney award on Mr. Brackman's very nice white Porsche.
Tell me about what you saw when Avery vandalized his car.
Well, Mr. Brackman was talking to Avery about how she needed to be prepared, and Avery just got really mad. She threw a total fit. She grabbed a permanent marker, went out to the parking lot, and wrote Worst Attorney Award on the hood of his car.
What do you know about the writing utensil that Avery used to write on his car?
Well, it was a permanent marker, and it was pretty clearly a permanent marker, too. It was on the easel where we keep our paper. Avery claims she thought it was a dry erase marker.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Response?
Personal knowledge. Based on personal knowledge, the witness has personal knowledge of this.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, the witness was testifying that Avery actually did believe that it was a permanent marker, and she would have no way of knowing that.
So you've got a hearsay issue as well as speculation. The witness cannot testify as to what somebody else was thinking. So the court will sustain the objection. Next question.
How did Mr. Brackman respond to his car being vandalized?
I mean, he was pretty upset, but decided not to press any charges. Instead, Avery was permanently off the team.
Did you see Avery after she was kicked off the mock trial team?
I did. I saw Avery at the Fry Shack, which is a place a lot of mockers like to hang out. And we talked about how she should probably just move on from mock trial.
Did you hear from Avery again after that interaction?
Yes, I did. Avery texted me asking if I could talk to Mr. Brackman about her getting back on the team.
Do you have a copy of Exhibit 14?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 14?
Those are the texts I received from Avery.
How do you know this?
I received them and I sent them to the detective.
And is this a fair and accurate representation?
Yes.
Your Honor, we move for the admission of Exhibit 14.
Any objection to 14?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection, hearsay.
Response?
One sec. Statement by a party opponent.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, this is actually not a statement by a party opponent. As you will hear later this evening, Avery Becker did not send those text messages.
So the issue perhaps as to authenticity of the messages, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
May I respond?
Go ahead.
You cannot prove that she did not send these text messages. There is no evidence that she didn't send them.
The court is going to admit Exhibit 14, finding that the requisite record has been made for the admissibility, noting that the credibility of the exhibit is subject to cross-examination as well as additional testimony by other witnesses. Exhibit 14 is admitted.
Your Honor, do we have permission to, or does my co-counsel have permission to screen share the exhibit?
Yes, you may.
Can you tell me about what Avery texted you?
Yes, Avery texted me asking to talk to Mr. Brackman about her getting on the team, and I said I would, I guess, and I did. And basically he was like, no way. So I told Avery that, and she said, if Mr. Brackman was upset about what I did to his car, wait until he sees what I'll do to his house. And then later on, she says she was going to trash his house.
Moving on. Do you know Blair Rollins?
Yes.
And what was
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
Do you know Blair Rollins, yes or no? What's the lack of foundation? That sounds like a foundational question in and of itself.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I misheard the question.
Oh, okay. You may continue.
Okay. What was your relationship with Blair Rollins?
I would say we're mutual acquaintances.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Hello, Ms. Fuentes. Avery told you about mock trial when you were a freshman.
Yes.
And you worked hard at mock trial, but Avery was just naturally better than you.
I mean, I would say we were equally skilled. We had totally different approaches.
And it upset you that Avery never prepared for practice and just made things up as she went along.
I mean, yeah, it was frustrating to the whole team and Mr. Brackman.
In fact, you even asked your coach, Coach Brackman, why he put up with Avery's behavior and lackadaisical attitude.
I mean, yeah, she simply wasn't pulling her weight on the team.
So it sounds like you were resentful of Avery.
I mean, we were really good friends, but she, like I said, she really didn't pull her weight on the team. So, I mean, it was hard not to be resentful towards her.
But Avery never let the team down.
I mean, like I was saying, she was a really good lawyer and she was great at making things up on the witness stand. It was just the preparation that was really frustrating.
In fact, Avery won awards such as Best Closer and Best Attorney at regionals.
Yeah.
But it really irritated you and the team that she won awards.
I mean, yeah, we put so much work into our roles and she just wasn't at all prepared until we started the tournament. So it was very frustrating.
To use your words, it was a slap in the face when someone who is only average and doesn't work hard wins awards.
I mean, yeah.
Especially when the awards are just won based on good looks.
I did say that.
And not because of any real talent.
Yes.
So you don't believe that Avery was talented at mock trial?
Well, like I said, she was great at making things up.
And at the practice after regionals, where Avery had just won the Best Attorney Award and Best Closer, Mr. Brackman told Avery that good lawyers prepare, right?
Yes, I mean, I think that's probably true.
And good lawyers work hard.
I mean, again, I think that's true.
So Mr. Brackman told Avery that she wasn't a good lawyer.
I mean, not directly, no. He was just stressing the importance of being prepared and working hard for things.
And he told her this in front of the whole A-team.
Yes.
With all of her friends and peers watching.
Yes.
And Avery was rightfully embarrassed by her coach telling her that she wasn't a good lawyer.
I mean, she was more enraged than embarrassed.
It would have embarrassed anyone on the team.
I mean, it may have embarrassed anyone on the team. I don't think it would have enraged anyone on the team and caused them to vandalize the car.
Speculation.
Are you objecting to the testimony from your witness?
No, the question, sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, Your Honor. I asked the witness if she believes that their coach telling her that they weren't a good lawyer would embarrass anyone on the team.
I think that given the witness's circumstances and experience on the team, I believe that the witness can reasonably answer that. Oh, objection is overruled.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Please
Yes,
do.
please.
It would have embarrassed anyone on the team.
Again, I think it would have embarrassed, but not enraged anyone enough to vandalize his property.
And then Mr. Brackman demoted Avery to the B team.
After she was late so many times.
And you thought that she rightfully deserved that.
I mean, yeah.
And really, you thought the team would be better off without her.
I mean, yeah, like she was always late. It was a big hassle.
And her being demoted would have given you a promotion on the team.
Yes.
And you were excited to have this larger role on the team.
I mean, I'm always willing to take up a challenge. So yeah, I was excited.
With Avery gone, it was finally your moment to shine.
I mean, like I said, I'm happy to take up a challenge. So yeah, I was excited.
And you even thought, and then Avery Becker wrote Worst Attorney Award on the hood of Mr. Brackman's car.
Yes.
And when she wrote on his car, you believe that she did not think that she was holding a dry erase marker.
No, she claimed she did believe she was holding a dry erase marker.
But you believe that she did not think that she was holding a dry erase marker, that she knew that she was holding a Sharpie.
I mean, it's pretty obvious if you're holding a Sharpie, you go up to a car, you open the Sharpie, that it would be a Sharpie, not a dry erase marker. So yeah, that would be my thoughts.
But you would have no way of knowing what she was thinking.
I mean, no, but she was holding a Sharpie, so.
And you thought that Mr. Brackman should have pressed criminal charges against Avery.
I mean, she did vandalize his car, so.
Today, you told us that you were really good friends and basically best friends with Avery.
Yes, we spent a lot of time every week together.
And you wanted your best friend to be charged with a felony.
I mean, I think if you do something that makes you deserve to be charged with a felony, then you should be charged with a felony.
And you've said that because Avery was kicked off the team, there was a good chance what she did was going to make the team forfeit going to the state competition.
Yes, we're short members.
So you must have been very angry at her after all your hard work.
I mean, I was upset, I would say.
And you actually saw Avery at the Fry Shack after she was kicked off the team.
Yes, I did.
And you claimed that you had a great talk about her moving forward and forgetting about mock trial.
I mean, yeah, she was clearly taking it out of hand.
And she let you play a game on her phone right before she went to the restroom and left.
Yes, and I gave her phone back.
So you admit that you were in possession of Avery's phone that day?
Briefly.
And you claim that Avery texted you after the vandalism incident to convince Mr. Brackman to let her back on the team.
Yes, she did.
And after you were informed about the murder of your coach, you told a detective about these supposed messages. Is that right?
Yes.
And you had to go on down to the police station to do an interview, right?
I did.
But you didn't bring your phone to the police station, did you?
No, my battery was so bad, my phone was basically a landline.
So you didn't bring your phone, even though you claim it had a text message on it that you believed could help the police figure out who killed Mr. Brackman.
I mean, it really wasn't unusual for me to forget my phone. It always had to be plugged in, and we were just talking about Avery as a whole.
Mr. Fuentes, that's a yes.
I mean, yes, but.
So you just sent the police screenshots of the text messages?
Yes, that's what I was told to do.
Screenshots that the police or anyone would have no idea of knowing if they were altered.
I mean, I don't know if they would.
And in all that time, the police department never asked you to bring your phone back, did they?
No, I did offer to, though.
And you are aware that there are apps that can generate text messages?
I'm not aware of that, no.
And you know that you can change the name of someone's contact to make it look like a certain person is texting you, but in reality, someone else is.
I mean, I know you can change contact names.
And you got rid of the phone that the text messages were on.
I mean, I traded it in. It was a really old phone. Like I was saying, the battery was horrible.
You don't have that phone anymore, do you?
No, I have no idea where it is.
So no one will ever actually get to see those text messages on your phone for themselves, will they?
Well, I did, but other than that, no.
Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. No further questions.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Does the prosecution rest?
Yes, the prosecution rests.
Thank you. Defense? First witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Professor Van Owen to the stand.
All right. Professor Van Owen? All right. Defense, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Professor Van Owen, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Blake Van Owen. I like to go by Professor.
Professor Van Owen, why are you here today?
I'm testifying as an expert witness on behalf of the defense.
How did you start out your career in criminal justice?
I started out as a police officer, and then I worked briefly as a school resource officer, a private security guard, and then I went into private investigation.
What is your current profession?
Well, while practicing as a private investigator, I taught a police procedure class and received my master's degree in criminal justice. I've been a professor at CU for 5 years now.
Is there anything else you do besides teaching and private investigation?
Yes, I'm an expert courtroom witness in the areas of police practices, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, general police investigations, false arrest, and forensic evidence techniques.
And how many times have you consulted on cases?
I've consulted on more than 100 cases.
Where have you been qualified as a defense expert?
For the U.S. district courts in the districts of Colorado, Kansas, and Arizona, and then for state courts in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and New Mexico.
What topics have you testified on as an expert?
Crime scene reconstruction 8 times, cell tower analysis 5 times, and general police investigation 12 times.
And are these subjects relevant to the case here today?
Definitely.
Your Honor, I offer Professor Van Owen as an expert in police investigation procedures, crime scene reconstruction, and cell tower data analysis.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
The witness is so qualified. You may continue.
Before I begin, did you know anyone involved in this case previous to starting your investigation?
Yes, I knew investigator Kuzak professionally, whom I generally like.
Additionally, are you getting paid to testify here today?
Yes, and I like to be completely open and honest with the jury. So I'm being paid $225 an hour for my general police investigation, and then $450 an hour for court testimony.
Now directing your attention to this case, what information did you review?
I reviewed the police reports, the crime scene reconstruction by Kyle Kuzak, cell tower reports and exhibits prepared by Detective Markowitz, and school records from the day of the murder. I also looked at things that I thought were neglected.
Let's start with the Ring doorbell. How is the Ring doorbell relevant to this case?
The Ring doorbell is as critical to the prosecution's case as the axle of your car is to you when you're going 90 miles per hour on the highway. This can provide insight to knowing who brought the knife, to knowing if the intruder surprised Brackman or if Brackman surprised the intruder.
What was the prosecution's take on this evidence?
The prosecution says that Mr. Brackman must have known about the intruder because of the Ring doorbell, saying that the Ring doorbell must have given his phone a notification.
Do you agree with this conclusion?
No, I have a Ring doorbell set up myself, so I know that you can turn on or off notifications or your ringer. So if Brackman had his notifications or his ringer turned off, then he wouldn't even have known that there was someone outside of his house.
Well, did Brackman have his notifications turned on?
We'll never know. The prosecution just assumed that he had his ringer turned on.
Why won't we know if Brackman had his notifications turned on or off?
Bad police investigation, to put it simply.
Have you had a chance to review Exhibit 18?
Yes.
What does this exhibit demonstrate in your expert opinion?
Well, you're supposed to explain common things commonly. If you're in Wyoming and you hear hoofbeats, it's fair to assume you're hearing horses. But in this situation, Kuzak heard those same hoofbeats and thought zebras. Kuzak says that the scuff marks show obvious evidence of a struggle in the house, but you can't carbonate scuff marks, so we really don't know if those were made 5 years ago or if they were made on the day of the murder.
Have you independently looked at the prosecution's CDR evidence that they've testified to earlier?
I have.
What can CDRs tell us about a case?
They can be really helpful to some cases. They can tell us the incoming and outgoing calls and texts and the other number involved, and they can potentially tell us a very general location of a phone, like a city.
What can't CDRs tell us about a case?
CDRs cannot give us the precise location of a person or a phone.
And why can't CDRs do this?
Your phone will connect to the most convenient, which is usually the least busy cell tower. So in a metropolitan setting, for example, a phone could generate 5 calls from the same location and connect to a different cell tower each time.
Are there other reasons that the CDR evidence should not be considered in this case?
We also know that people just aren't always with their phones, and as Avery and Taylor both testified, Avery lost her phone.
How does this conflict with Markowitz's conclusions?
Well, Markowitz says that the CDRs indicate that Avery's phone traveled from somewhere near Avery's house to somewhere near Brackman's house just before the murder. But all we know is that at a particular time, the phone communicated with a cell tower in that area. Where was the phone before then? We don't know because Markowitz didn't obtain that information.
Are there any other concerns you have regarding these CDRs?
Yes, Markowitz should have also looked at CDRs related to anyone else related to the case. So maybe Taylor Perkins or Blair Rollins or another mock trial student or a prior client maybe of Brackman's.
Did you examine the CDRs for anyone else who had a connection to this case?
I looked for Taylor Perkins's phone number in the CDRs.
What did you find?
Well, I found there are corresponding calls and texts from Taylor Perkins's phone relayed by antennas 2 and 3, which cover the mall and the fry shack, where Taylor and Avery both stated that they were at the time of the murder. So they're entirely consistent with Taylor and Avery's testimony of texting and calling Avery's phone to try and find it.
Well, just a moment ago, you were explaining why CDRs cannot tell us the precise location of a person or a phone. What changed?
That's completely right. But in this situation, Taylor stated that she was with her phone, whereas Avery said that she wasn't.
So the police did not properly investigate the CDRs. Are there other aspects of the case that the police also failed to properly investigate?
Well, take the screenshots, for example. I just cannot believe that the police failed to conduct a more thorough investigation of the phone and just simply accepted the screenshots that Alex sent them.
Do the police have the necessary technology to conduct a more thorough investigation?
Yes, the Denver police use a technology called Celebrite, which can be used for exactly this, but they failed to use that in this situation.
Why would the police want to use this technology and not just accept the screenshots from Alex?
The issue with the screenshot is that it could have easily been doctored before it was sent out.
Besides the screenshots, scuff marks, and CDRs, did the police properly investigate the rest of this crime?
No, they also managed to lose pictures of the blood drops in the hallway and pictures of cast-offs on the wall near the front door.
Is there anything else?
They also failed to investigate any other suspects, like Blair Rollins.
Who is Blair Rollins?
Blair Rollins is the child of Jonathan Rollins, who happens to be one of Brackman's former clients who was sentenced to prison. Blair is also a student at CHS, or was a student.
Why is Blair Rollins a suspect?
Blair was actually listed as suspect number 3, but was never thoroughly investigated or interviewed. But Blair does live near Avery. Blair was missing from school the day that Brackman was killed. Blair had the same height and build as Avery, and after graduation, Blair left Colorado and has yet to hear from the police.
Most importantly, did you find that Blair Rollins had a motive?
Surely watching your father be put away for murder is more of a motive to kill than being cut from a mock trial team.
Was there anything else that led you to Blair Rollins?
Yes, I obtained an electronic recording which demonstrates Blair's substantial motive to kill.
Have you previously reviewed what has been marked as Exhibit 22?
I have.
To the best of your knowledge, is this exhibit an accurate and fair depiction of the audio recording that you collected?
Yes.
At this time, I move for Exhibit 22 to be admitted into evidence and played for the jury.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
22 is admitted.
Permission for my co-counsel to publish.
Permission granted.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Thank you. What did you gather from this exhibit?
It's clear that Jonathan Rollins was vengeful.
And how did this exhibit impact your conclusion in this case?
As if seeing your father being put in jail for the rest of his life was not motive enough, now we have an audio recording proving that Rollins himself wanted to extract revenge on Brackman. Plus, we know that Jonathan Rollins will spend the rest of his life in prison and will not be able to get the revenge he wants. So it only makes sense that his child would carry out the revenge instead.
So, in your expert opinion, who killed Mackenzie Brackman?
I cannot say with 100% certainty who killed Brackman, nor can the police or the prosecution, but I do know one thing for sure. The police on this case did not conduct a proper or complete investigation. They heard hoofbeats in Wyoming, assumed they were hearing zebras, and brought it to court with not even a scuff mark of evidence. If Cusack and Markowitz had investigated any further, they would have come to the same conclusion I did. Avery Becker did not kill Mackenzie Brackman.
Thank you, Professor Van Owen. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good evening, Professor Van Owen. You're an investigator, correct?
That's right.
Is it true that you quit being a police officer because you disagree with their methods?
Yes, I was disillusioned.
Is it true that you think of yourself as the check on the power of police?
Definitely. I think it's a very important role.
So you would do anything to find flaws in their work?
I find that it happens very often, so I'm good at it, and I enjoy doing that.
Is it true that you have only ever worked for the defense?
Yes, that's right. The prosecution usually has their own police that testify.
And would you say that you are a defense witness because it pays well?
No, I enjoy what I do, and as you said, I consider myself a check on the power of the police.
Is it true that you're making $8,000 on this case?
Yes, around there.
And is it true that that's on the higher end of the money you make on this case?
Yes.
Let's talk about Avery Becker. Is it true that you reviewed the Ring doorbell footage?
I did.
The Ring doorbell footage shows someone with a small build entering the house, correct?
A medium-sized build, however you look at it.
All right. Would you consider Avery to have a small build?
Yes.
Let's talk about your theory. Is it true that you believe that Brackman was sitting down during the stabbing?
I think that's more consistent with the autopsy report.
And is it true that the purpose of the Ring doorbell is to alert the homeowner of someone in the house?
That's right. That's what mine is supposed to do, but I turn off the notifications sometimes. They get annoying.
All right, let's talk about the knife work. Is it true that the intruder was much smaller than Brackman?
Yes.
So it is your belief that it would be very hard for the intruder to have won a struggle with Brackman?
Yes, in the specific way that the prosecution says that the knife was oriented and the struggle that they got into, I think it's unlikely that they were facing each other and both standing up. So
yes.
Yes, that's right.
But it is your belief that it is possible that Brackman was sitting down, the intruder could, sorry. Is there any clear evidence that disproves the bear hug theory?
No.
Great, thank you. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Van Owen, does the money you make influence your testimony here today?
Absolutely not. I find that the police oftentimes drop the ball and they oftentimes have bad practices, and I really just don't want to see people be put to prison who shouldn't be.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Defense witness 2.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
All right. We have Taylor Perkins.
Hello, Mr. Perkins.
Hello.
Hello. I am going to begin my direct examination.
Sorry about that, everybody.
No worries. Go ahead. Please state your name for the jury.
Taylor Perkins.
Tell us about yourself.
I'm a freshman at CU Boulder. I went to Colorado High School. I'm a pretty average guy. I love to play video games and stuff like that.
How are you connected to today's case?
I was asked to testify. I am Avery's best friend who's been charged with murdering our late mock trial coach, Mackenzie Bratman, which is truly heartbreaking to all of us that knew him. I'm just here to do my part by revealing the truth to the jury.
How do you know Avery?
We were best friends in high school. We would drive to school together and we hung out all the time. I honestly don't think I would have done mock trial if it wasn't for Avery. It was great being on the team with her.
How did Avery contribute to the team?
Avery was amazing. She was by far the best lawyer on the team, really good at thinking on her feet, which is important in mock trial. Even though she wasn't always as prepared, she always did a great job.
From your observations, what was Brackman and Avery's relationship like?
Avery's effortless but incredibly successful approach to mock trial honestly drove Bratman crazy. He always gave her a hard time, which caused tension. Seemed like a classic coach to student dynamic.
Did that tension ever escalate or intensify?
Yes, about a month before regionals last year, Avery came to practice as unprepared as I've ever seen her. Even though winging it, she performed her closing flawlessly. But because it was a bit off track from what was prepared, Bratman became so furious he demoted her to the B team.
What happened after that practice?
I decided to step down from the team in support of my friend. I knew if I stepped down, Avery had a good chance of getting back on the team.
Why did you do that?
It really wasn't a hard decision for me. Mock trial meant way more to Avery than it did to me. I know that she didn't always try that hard, but she was definitely A-team material. She was what made the team great and had the awards to prove it.
What happened when you stepped down from the team?
Once I left the team, coach had no choice but to put Avery back on the A-team. And I know I did the right thing. Avery won best attorney and best closing argument at the regional tournament that year.
How were Brackman and Avery after that?
Well, they had some huge fight that made her upset. That night, she told me she wrote worst attorney ever with what she thought was erasable marker on his car. She could be immature and play a prank, but she wasn't malicious or violent.
Did Avery ever return to practice?
Bratman kicked her off the A-team for good, even though she apologized over and over. We talked about ways she could get back on the team. She even texted everybody on the team as a last resort. She went to practice on March 5th to talk it over with coach, but he sent her away. And so, of course, that made her a little upset. So we went to the Fry Shack after.
What is the Fry Shack?
Oh, it's just a burger place. We hang out there all the time.
What happened at the Fry Shack?
Well, to our surprise, we ran into most of the mock trial team. Everyone was very sympathetic towards Avery, saying it was unfair she was kicked off, even Alex Cifuentes.
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, this goes to Mr. Perkins' personal perception. He was on the team for 4 years, was best friends with Avery, and is qualified to share his observations about members of the team.
Response?
I'm objecting to what he said when he said that the other team members were talking about how it was unfair that Avery was no longer on the team, which is an out-of-court statement.
So hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. The court finds that in this context it is hearsay, and the court will sustain the objection. Next question.
Your Honor. Did you see Alex at the Fry Shack?
Yeah, Alex was there. Alex and Avery didn't always get along. On the surface, it might have been okay, but deep down, it really wasn't. Avery was the best lawyer, so Alex was always, second to Avery, which created a little bit of tension.
What happened next?
Well, Alex sat at our table and had a pretty aggressive demeanor towards Avery, who eventually got a little upset and went to the bathroom. So upset, I think she even left her phone behind on the table. As soon as she returned, we left.
Could anyone have taken Avery's phone while she was in the restroom?
Yes, that's definitely possible. Like I said, Alex was still at the table.
Where were you the morning of Brackman's death?
On the morning of March 6th, I hadn't been able to reach Avery by text or by phone. Once she got to my house to pick me up from school like she usually does, we realized her phone was missing.
Did you two spend time together that day?
Yeah, we skipped school and spent the rest of the day retracing our steps. We looked at every store in the mall where we had been the day before. All I could remember is that I thought she left her phone on the table at the Fry Shack. So we went there and we ran into some of the mock trial kids, which is a little bit surprising. I guess Bratman hadn't shown up to practice that day.
Other than retracing your steps, did you do anything else to try to locate Avery's phone?
Yeah, we texted it and we called it several times. But in retrospect, we should have just tried to use Find My iPhone. I have an Android, and I forgot that you can use the iCloud website to use Find My iPhone. It just wasn't my first nature.
To be clear, you were with Avery the entire day of Brackman's death.
Yes, she could not have left me to go to Bratman's house at any point that day.
Did you ever find Avery's phone?
No, since she left it on the table where Alex was, it's possible he took it and made all those fake messages up just to set her up.
Did anyone else on the mock trial team have conflict with Brackman besides Avery?
Nobody specific on the team, but it's galactic knowledge that one of our classmates, Blair Rawlings, hated Bratman for screwing up the case that sent her dad to prison. He was actually absent from school, or she was actually absent from school the day that Bratman was killed. I wouldn't be surprised if she did it.
Now that you have testified that you and Avery are best friends, would you lie for her?
I would not lie about something like this. I get prosecuted for perjury and sent to prison. Yes, I know she's my best friend, but giving her an alibi for murder is insane.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Perkins. You went to Colorado High School, correct?
Yes.
And you are close friends with the defendant, Avery Becker, yes?
Yeah, we are best friends.
And you would consider yourself a loyal friend, isn't that right?
Yeah, I would consider myself a good friend.
Let's talk about the deceased, Mackenzie Brackman. He was your mock trial coach, right?
Yes, he was.
And you believed him to be a mediocre coach, correct?
Yeah, pretty mediocre coach and pretty mediocre lawyer too.
And you said that he made bad choices for the team, yes?
Yes.
You even said you wouldn't guess he did any better for his clients, yes?
Yes, I do.
And you observed the relationship between Avery and Mr. Brockman, correct?
Yeah, Mr. Bratman was very mean to Avery.
And you even described the relationship to be a feud, yes?
Yeah, sometimes I found it a little funny. In retrospect, it's not as funny anymore.
And you even said that this feud bothered Avery, right?
Yes.
You stated that it bothered Avery, quote, enough to play some pranks on Coach, yes?
Yeah, enough to play a prank on Coach.
And you also talked about how Avery could be rash, right?
Yeah, she could be a little rash and sometimes immature.
And from your observations, Brockman often found Avery unprepared at practice. Isn't that true?
Yeah, she could come to practice a little unprepared, but she always did so amazing.
But that is a yes, right?
Yes.
And the month before the regional tournament was no exception, correct?
Yeah, she came to practice as unprepared as I've ever seen.
In fact, you even said Avery was making things up on the fly, correct?
Yeah, she was thinking on her feet, which she was very good at.
And that they were getting off track from the prepared closing statements, yes?
Yeah, I was a little off track, but she did it, the closing so well.
And you also said that you knew Avery didn't try that hard, right?
Yeah, she didn't always try that hard, but she was amazing.
And so Avery was demoted down from the A team to the B team, correct?
Yes.
And so you decided to step down from the A team in support of your friend, yes?
Yeah, I stepped down in support of my friend.
Moving on, you weren't there when Avery wrote on your coach's car, right?
No, I was not.
But you heard all about it from Avery, yes?
Yeah, Avery told me about it. We were best friends. She told me everything.
And from their side of the story, you learned that Avery was upset, yes?
Yes, Avery was upset.
And you learned about how Avery wrote Worst Attorney Award right on the hood of Brockman's beloved Porsche 911 Carrera, yes?
Yeah, with what she thought was a raceable marker, but yes.
And you discovered that that action ruined the paint on that Porsche, yes?
Yes, sadly it did.
But when you learned about this situation, you said, quote, Avery just wanted to let off some steam. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Perkins, you were with Avery the entire day that Brackman was killed.
Yes, I was.
And Avery was your best friend.
Yeah, she was.
Would you lie for Avery?
I would never lie for Avery.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Witness is excused. Next defense witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Avery Becker.
You said prosecution. You mean defense?
Defense, excuse me.
It's been a long day. All right. We have the witness here. You may begin.
Can you state your name for the record?
My name is Avery Becker.
Why are you here today?
Well, I'm the defendant in this case, and I truly can't believe I'm here today. I've been accused of a horrific crime that I could never have ever done.
Tell us about the late Mr. Brackman.
He was my mock trial coach, and I'm just still in so much shock that he's no longer with us. I mean, we didn't have the best relationship, but they're saying I broke into the guy's house and we got into a fight and that I stabbed him with a knife and killed him? In a million years, I could never have done something like that.
Can you tell us about your experience with mock trial?
Yeah, I mean, I just loved mock trial. To be frank, I was really, really good at it. Oh, sorry.
Can you tell us about what happened at the mock trial regional tournament?
Yeah, I won the Best Attorney Award and Closer, which felt really good. And I mean, this is kind of embarrassing, but honestly, I was super proud of myself.
What happened after your success at regionals?
The practice after regionals, I had just told, like the 2 awards that I had just won that I just told you about, I was expecting for Mr. Brackman to congratulate me, but instead, he started lecturing me about how I didn't follow his script, and he even said that I didn't deserve my awards. I know it sounds stupid, but it just made me feel so frustrated.
You rode on Coach Brackman's car. Can you tell the jury why you did that?
Yeah, well, I know I come across very confident, but really I'm just a girl. And when he was saying that I didn't deserve my awards and basically that I was a bad attorney, I was so upset and I walked out of practice. I had what I did truly think was a dry erase marker in my hands. And I saw his car and I wrote Worst Attorney Award on it. I regret it so much. I know that I really messed up. And honestly, it's just so embarrassing that I did something like that.
What happened when Mr. Brackman discovered this?
He saw the car and he started screaming at me. He told me I was off the team.
What happened after that?
Well, I went home to my mom and I was just crying and crying about it. I couldn't believe I was off the team and I just felt so much remorse for the awful thing I had done to his car. I mean, luckily she calmed me down as she always does.
Did you have any interactions with Mr. Brackman after that?
No, I tried to apologize so many times for what I did to his car. I went to his office. I texted him. I offered to scrub it. Heck, I even offered to get a job and pay for the car. Now, he'll never know how sorry I felt and even how grateful I am for everything he did for our team.
What did you do on March 5th?
Well, I was super upset about being kicked off the team, and Taylor and I decided to go to the Fry Shack. Whenever I'm sad, I always get a milkshake at the Fry Shack. And I do remember Alex being there because we don't really get along. And then some of the other people on the mock trial team were there too. Then we went and did some retail therapy at the mall and then went home.
Can you tell us about the day you found out you'd lost your phone, which was also the day Mr. Brackman was murdered, March 6th?
Yeah, well, in the morning I woke up and I couldn't find my phone anywhere. And I went to Taylor's house and we decided to skip school to look for it. I mean, we're both seniors, so I didn't really feel that badly about it, but still, I never do things like that.
Where did you go that day?
Well, the last time I remembered having my phone was at the Fry Shack. So we went there and then we went to the mall and we're just looking all over for it.
What did you do to try and find it?
We were just calling it and texting it with Taylor's phone and hoping it would ring and we would hear it, but when we called it, it would go straight to voicemail.
Your Honor, my co-counsel is sharing that's been previously admitted as Exhibit 14.
You may continue.
Ms. Becker, is that your name on the contact?
Yeah, it sure is, but my friends don't use my last name in their contacts. It's like something my grandma would do.
Did you send these texts?
God, no, that definitely was not me texting. I don't know how to use a comma to save my life.
Were you and Alex Cifuentes close?
Like I told you, not at all. I wouldn't have texted Alex for help. Alex wouldn't have even helped me anyway if I did ask her. Alex didn't want me back on the team because without me on the team, Alex would be the best attorney.
Thank you, Ms. Mullens. We heard Professor Van Owen testify here today about Blair Rollins. Do you know Blair Rollins?
Yeah, of course. I know him because he goes to CHS. And everyone knows that Blair hated Brackman for screwing up his dad's case and getting his dad sent to prison. And yet, I'm being accused of this, and all I ever did was have a few disagreements with Coach Brackman over mock trial. Oh my God, and now that I'm thinking about it, we were like the same size too.
Did you know where Coach Brackman lived?
Of course not. I had no idea where he lived. It'd be so weird.
Did you break into Mr. Brackman's house?
No. I know I rode on Mr. Brackman's car, but I would never go into someone else's house. I wrote on his car the one time, but I don't do things like that.
Ms. Becker, did you kill Mackenzie Brackman?
Absolutely not. This was mock trial. It definitely wasn't life or death. I just could never have done this.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Ms. Becker. Is it true that you originally joined mock trial specifically to hang out with Taylor Perkins and play on your phone?
Yeah, but I loved mock trial.
And after a while, you started liking it, right?
I mean, I don't know exactly when I started liking it, but it was really fun. It was an activity that I could get out of the house and see people.
But despite enjoying it, you didn't choose to put as much effort in as, say, other team members, right?
Well, I mean, not to be conceited, but I was really good at it. I didn't really need to.
Did you not being as prepared lead to a grudge forming between you and Brackman?
Yeah, Brackman loved scripts. He loved everything to be prepared ahead of time. You know, he was just very by the books, and I wasn't like that. I like to think on my feet.
Is it true that you argued with Brackman almost every practice?
Yeah, it's true, but it was over mock trial.
And you were always talking back to him when you had these arguments?
Yeah, I can be kind of stubborn sometimes.
And when he bumped you down to B team, you were extremely angry, right?
Yeah, I was upset. I deserved to be on A team.
And after this happened, you and Brackman had started to fight again. You were angry enough to write on his car.
I was. It was so rash, and I'm so embarrassed that I even did that. But I thought it was a Sharpie. I thought it was an Expo marker. I really did. And then I couldn't erase it, and I was devastated.
But you did use a Sharpie to write on his car.
I did, and I'm so embarrassed of what I did.
Were you aware of this Sharpie? This being a Sharpie?
Of course not. I thought it was an Expo marker.
Moving on. Is it true that you didn't notice your phone was missing until the next day?
That's true.
And in your, you said that your mom takes your phone at night, right?
Right.
So is it all possible that your mom could have had your phone?
No, because like I said, I had mock trial and I was at the fry shack with it. She just didn't take it that night. It was sort of strange.
All right. And in your text messages with Alex, you admitted to going in and trashing his house, yes?
No, that wasn't me texting. I never did this.
But if it was you texting, you did admit that.
But it wasn't me.
Lastly, you said that you would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing you did, right?
And it's been taken incredibly out of context. I never meant it like that. I wanted to go to state and prove him wrong and show him that thinking on your feet and listening to the witness makes you the best attorney. I could never have done this.
No further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
Miss Becker, where is the last place you remember seeing your phone?
Like I said, at the fry shack in the mall.
And Miss Becker, where were you on the day of March 6th?
I was with Taylor the whole day looking for my phone.
Thank you, Miss Becker. No further questions.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense rests.
Thank you. Are we ready for closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Prosecution may begin.
Right place, right time, right defendant. This is a case where there is just too much evidence against the defendant, Avery Becker, for killing Mackenzie Brackman, for this murder to be a coincidence. It is not a wrong place, wrong time situation. It is a purposeful break-in by Avery Becker that ended in a murder. The evidence in this case has shown that Mackenzie Brackman was killed by one of his very own students, Avery Becker. On March 6, 2020, Avery Becker committed second-degree burglary and also ended up killing Mackenzie Brackman. My co-counsel and I have proven this beyond a reasonable doubt, so we ask that you return a verdict of guilty. Avery Becker was a hot-headed member of the mock trial team at Colorado High School who was unable to control her anger. She was on the A team, coached by Mr. Brackman, the mock trial's beloved coach. You heard Alex Cifuentes say that Avery wasn't putting in as much effort as all the other team members, and although Brackman had talked to her about it, she didn't care enough to put in all the effort. After the regional competition, he lectured her, which made her mad enough to grab a Sharpie and write on Brackman's car, "World's worst attorney." Finally, after Brackman had had enough, he kicked Avery off the team, giving her a motive for the murder. Avery often did things she later regretted. You heard Detective Jordan Markowitz say that Avery Becker's cell phone was in the area of Brackman's house at the time of the murder. You also heard her say that although Becker entered the house to burgle it when Brackman wasn't there, she panicked and ended up murdering him. Lastly, you heard her say that she received text messages from Mrs. Fuentes. In those messages, the defendant admitted to planning on going in and trashing Brackman's house. You also heard Kyle Kuzak say that the perpetrator, who was caught on the ring door video, had the same height and build of Avery Becker. Secondly, you heard her say that there was a knife missing from the knife block in the house. When the murder weapon was recovered, it was found to be a knife that fit in the missing space in the knife block. This indicated that the murder was unplanned. Next, you heard her say that the theory about the defendant was sneaking up behind Brackman to stab him was most likely untrue. And as for Blair Rollins, the video of them saying, "I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do," cannot be used to prove that they are a better suspect, since there was another person who said the same thing, that person being Avery Becker. Back to Mr. Brackman, who was not just an attorney, he was a really good one. And he was able to pass on his love for law by teaching high school students and growing their love for law too. Today you have heard that Mr. Brackman repeatedly asked Avery to prepare more for mock trial, but Avery simply refused to do so. Avery disliked Brackman. She wrote on his car and she texted Alex Cifuentes that she was going to break into Brackman's house. All of this evidence is not just a coincidence. It is proof that Avery Becker killed Mr. Brackman. Regardless of whether or not Avery knew she had a Sharpie in hand, she was still intending to write on his car, which is a finable offense. She entered Brackman's house with the intent to burglarize it, and she ended up killing him too. This case is a perfect example of a person not being able to control their anger. As this trial ends, we ask that you find Avery Becker guilty of murder in the first degree, as well as second-degree burglary on March 6, 2020. Thank you for your time.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Open and shut. The prosecution saw this case And you know what they did? They came to the easiest conclusion they could: open and shut. They found one lead from the second top suspect who had enormous motivation to lie and followed it with tunnel vision. You've heard the prosecution's case, and all you learned is how much they didn't do. Avery Becker is being framed for murder because the prosecution's incompetent detectives failed to discover the truth. There are three key reasons why the prosecution failed to meet their burden. The first is that the whole theory of the prosecution's case is based on screenshots of alleged text messages between arch rivals Alex Cifuentes and Avery Becker, which Avery denies. Once Alex Cifuentes, suspect number 2, provided Detective Markowitz with mere screenshots of the alleged text, it was all over. It was an open and shut case. Markowitz's first lead was her last lead, around which she built her entire theory of the case. And because she figured her work was done, and besides she didn't care much for Mackenzie Brackman, she willingly accepted this gift: screenshots of the text. This is the police officer with the cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement. She couldn't be bothered to even pick up or examine Alex's phone, which coincidentally later Alex threw out. It is worth noting that by Alex's own admission, Avery lent her phone to Alex the night before the murder at the Fry Shack to play a game. Avery was so upset about being kicked off the team that she left suddenly, possibly leaving her phone behind. It is the last time she remembered having it, and our expert confirmed that the texts are easily manipulated. The second reason why the prosecution failed to meet their burden is that they used inherently unreliable caller data records, or CDRs, to place Avery at the scene of the crime. Our expert clearly established that CDRs cannot determine the actual location of the phone because calls aren't necessarily picked up by the cell tower closest to the phone. And CDRs can't tell us where the phone's owner is. Avery didn't have her phone on March 6th because it was lost. Plus, why didn't the prosecution obtain the CDRs for Alex or Blair Rollins' phones? The prosecution used the CDRs of Avery's phone to fit their version of the facts, even when there was evidence to the contrary and many other legitimate leads to follow. This brings us to the third reason. The prosecution didn't follow all the leads. Detective Markowitz stated that she initially believed that Mackenzie Brackman was murdered by one of his disgruntled ex-clients. Did Detective Markowitz ever pursue even one ex-client? No. You heard that a former client of Mr. Brackman's, Jonathan Rollins, was imprisoned because of Mr. Brackman. His son, Blair Rollins, who is suspect number 3, was also absent from school on March 6th, but was never even interviewed, his cell phone data never examined, and he disappeared from Colorado after graduation. Yet the prosecution wants you to believe Avery did this. She had disagreements with Mr. Brackman over mock trial. That's not exactly a motive for murder. The defense doesn't have the burden of proof here. It is entirely the prosecution's burden, which they failed to meet. There is more than just reasonable doubt here. There is a sea of doubt. This was not an open and shut case, as the prosecution wants you to believe. And what matters now is that an innocent person is not held accountable for a crime she didn't commit. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you, after considering all the evidence, and especially the lack of evidence, that you find our client Avery Becker innocent of all charges. Thank you.
Rebuttal closing.
Yes, Your Honor. 1 sec, sorry. We do not have any type of tunnel vision in this case. Both of our expert witnesses have found sufficient evidence that has led them to their conclusion that Avery Becker is the perpetrator. They not only used the screenshots to confirm, they also visited the scene of the crime and organized what they saw there to find out that Avery was indeed guilty. The other leads aren't relevant because all of this evidence has led to one person and one person only, Avery Becker.
All right. I think the trial has concluded. We'll give the scoring judges just a minute to finish up, and then they turn their cameras on and let me know when they're done.
I'm done.
Mr. Friedman, do you want to give any feedback to the students?
I thought they did a great job. I was, it's not hard. It's very hard to think on your feet to do this stuff, even with the preparation. And you all remain poised, and that was a very important thing because you will have curveballs thrown at you, and you just need to get back at it. So good job.
Mr. Backenstead, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm very impressed by you guys. High schoolers weren't like this when I was in high school. Just congratulations for everything and your professionalism. Good job.
I just want to give you all kudos. You did an amazing job. That was awesome. And I know that this format is hard this year. We miss not having all the students in the courthouse and kind of the chaos and the fun and the excitement and kind of the nerves. So you lose a little bit of that in your bedrooms and in your living room there. But I just want to say thanks for hanging in this year and for really putting in the time and the energy and the effort. You guys did an awesome job. It was a hysterical fact pattern that gave you a little fun to work with. I thought your witnesses did such a good job. Really kind of took on the role and the characters really well. Made me giggle a couple times. I just wanted to throw out one little piece about hearsay, because hearsay is something that lawyers and judges, we deal with all the time. And so, as you know, hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. And it'll come in a lot of times when you're asking witnesses questions, they don't always understand, and they'll oftentimes, start talking about, oh, and so told me this, and so told me that. And one of the best, when I was a lawyer, one of my best responses, because you'll get objections all the time to hearsay, is it's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. So that's kind of your go-to response, regardless of what the person said. That's just kind of a quick, easy one. And then it gives you a little more time. Then the other side has to explain why they're saying that statement is offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Gets you a minute to actually think about it and do the mental gymnastics. You can always ask the judge, I'll withdraw that question and ask it a different way. That way, if you ask something and you realize that you've walked your witness into, a trap, just withdraw that question and try it a little different way. You save face in front of the jury, and then you're able to kind of stop, because sometimes you just need a minute to think and let it soak in for a sec. So those are my little go-to easy fix for those. Heather, are we going to
I'm going to go check really quick. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go check and make sure that all the score sheets have been received in the back room, and then I will release you. So give me 1 second, okay?
In the meantime, does anyone have any questions for me? Nothing? You get to ask the judge anything?
What, you might have already said this, but what like specific courts do you work in?
So I have a really cool docket. I do our specialty courts. So I do our veterans treatment court, our drug court, our mental health court, and our DUI court. And then I also do juvenile court. So I do juvenile delinquency, so kids who are getting in trouble with the law. And I also do what's called dependency and neglect court. So I do cases where social services is involved with families and trying to, help kids and families out. So the good part of that is I get to do all the adoptions, which are awesome. Even now we've had to do Zoom. We're able to do the adoptions over Zoom, and everybody still cries, and it's wonderful. So I'm really lucky. Heather, we good?
We are all set. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations on all your hard work. And just so you know, your teachers will be receiving the scores and who's moving on. So just so you're aware of that, just be patient with us to get them all in, okay? Congratulations. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Guys, you worked really hard.
Good job.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. My Wi-Fi cut out earlier. That's why I was a little late to it. Thank you, guys.
You're fine. The bar's low with the WebEx. You did a great job.